And we still may not cover everything, but we'll do what we can. And if you missed any of the others, they're on the Wildwood Church YouTube channel. And I'll be grabbing them for my YouTube channel also. So they'll be available. We'll stick them on Facebook. And there's a lot of people that couldn't be here, especially due to COVID situations. And so we're trusting that many people will be encouraged, not with us, but with what God is able to do. We consider ourselves ordinary people. In fact, as I reflect back, I can see that I was not the kind of leader that people said, oh, he's a leader, let's pick him. But generally, they picked me because I was there, I was available. And so the Lord has used us, and he can use anybody. Doesn't matter what your talents or skills are, he can use you if you're willing to be used.
Amen. One of my favorite quotes, and I should have looked it up before I came this evening, comes from the book Education. I believe it's Education, where it says, this may be slightly paraphrased, but the Holy Spirit can teach us more in a moment than the great men of earth in a lifetime. And I believe that with all my heart. If God calls you to do something, he will equip you to do it.
As we closed our last meeting, we were talking to you about the physical collapse that I had, which forced me to return to Wildwood. My wife couldn't come with me because of the obligations, at least not right away. And so I was flown down here, met at the airport by Dr. Hansen, and taken to the Wildwood Hospital. And boy, was I thankful for the Wildwood Hospital. And they put me on some medication and got my lungs working good. But after I came off the medication, I was not in very good condition. Medication sometimes helps you, but then later you're worse off. And so that's what happened to me. And so for about a year, I struggled to breathe, and I sort of thought my work was ended, that I would not be able to do much anymore. And one incident comes to mind. We had tried the various things, and nothing seemed to really open the lungs up like it would take to be of much value to anybody. But one day we thought about using a hot half bath. And so I got in the hot half bath and took it as hot as I could stand for about a half an hour. I was sweating like crazy. And my lungs opened right up. And I did more of those, but never was it so pronounced in what it did. So I'm wondering if God didn't just give me a blessing on that occasion. And so throughout the year, I slowly improved. And of course, Mountain Missionary couldn't wait for a whole year to have a president. So Pastor Cleveland had come to help me up there. And so he was asked to be president up there. And so after the year was over, I didn't have a job. But Wildwood decided to put me to work again. And I thought sometimes, remember those of you that were here, I said I never wanted to go back to Wildwood. Well, I guess that was the only way he could get me back here. So I didn't have a job. I was here at Wildwood, and they asked me to do the personnel work again. And so I started with that. At perhaps the next constituency meeting, I was asked by the constituency to be the executive vice president. This was sort of promoted by Harold Damon, the one that I was kind of scared of when we first came here. But he had such a tender heart underneath all that. And he saw that Warren Wilson was trying to keep Wildwood going and trying to keep the worldwide work going. And I think that's why he pushed for me to be the executive vice president. But that was a little bit disturbing to Warren Wilson, apparently. And so the next year, he didn't want me to be executive vice president. So I was put in as vice president. And he told me that, his love really, he really cared about Wildwood, but his love was the worldwide work and traveling. He traveled over 100,000 miles every year. Most of his traveling was with car. And so he said to me, I want you to run Wildwood and I'll run the worldwide work. Well, apparently he didn't mean that as I understood it. And so I would get frustrated. He'd come back, he'd come to committee, and he would change things around. And so it was kind of frustrating to me, and that built up some stress for the next constituency meeting. And so they brought Wayne Dull here to kind of, talk around the campus and so on. And so he came and he talked to me, and I explained the situation to him. Well, the end result was that when the constituency met, they brought out the list of officers, and I wasn't on there at all. And so that really hurt me because nobody came and talked to me about the fact they were going to do that, or, why was the problem, why couldn't the problem be solved, and so on. So,
I think in a sense it was partly because Woolworth he had told, I don't know if it was Wayne or Warren Wilson, but he told them that he just really couldn't work in that capacity for another year.
With the same situation.
Yeah, with the same situation. It was very frustrating for him.
In other words, if I was supposed to run Wildwood, then I needed to be able to run it. And so, all those things probably had their weight, but I know how committees go, and so they just decided that they would be better off without me. So they figured another way to run Wildwood with Roy Brown and Don Johnson, and so again, I was without a job, and something very interesting happened that night. There was a family that we had to discipline because they were undermining the principles of Wildwood and inviting students over to undermine the principles here. And so we ended up having to dismiss them. We kind of let them hang themselves, and they did, and so then they ended up leaving. And so that night, the son called me up, and somehow he'd already heard about it, and he said, I'm so glad they kicked you out, you rotten person, and he went on and on about all this, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. But the very next day, there was a board meeting, and I was elected president of Mountain Missionary Institute because Pastor Cleveland had accepted the presidency of a Riverside farm in Africa, and so that left a vacancy up at Mountain Missionary. So in some ways, I didn't really feel called to go there, but I didn't have a job. I think they were willing to put me as chaplain of the Lifestyle Center, and sometimes I wish I had taken that, but I didn't, and so I took the job at Mountain Missionary.
And Mountain Missionary definitely needed some help,
Yeah.
big time.
Unfortunately, those that were there after I had to leave, they had a reaction to my overwork situation, and they said, we're not going to work like Pastor Atwood did. But as a result, they damaged the business so that we never could get it, even though we went back for 2 years. We
To
could
be
not
with you
get
for this
wholesale
special
business,
weekend.
going
I
well
would-
enough to support the place properly again. And so it was kind of a struggle, and we won't say much about when we were there. I did want to say one thing. You know, sometimes when you come into this work, you wonder, how will we ever be able to make big purchases? Now, some people have sold a house, or they have a good-sized bank account, but we didn't. We came in here with nothing practically, and after all those years of working in pioneer work, we basically had nothing.
And everything we did have was falling apart.
Yeah. And so the time came we needed a car. You remember we came in with a brand new car, and when people asked, what are you going to do when your car wears out? I always said, well, the Lord will be here before that. But it didn't happen. And so our car wore out. And at that time, we had a license to go to the auction in Chattanooga. And so I went down there one day and looked around, and I found 3 cars that I felt was possible with what money we had, which I think was around $1,000. And I couldn't stay because the duty's back here, but I told the man from the auto shop who was going to be there, forget who that was at that time, but I told him how much I would pay. Well, the first 2 went too high. The third one was a Dodge Colt, and the price that I put on it, the auctioneer could not get that much for it. And in fact, he said, no, we can't sell it for that. The bank has more money in it than that, and they're not willing to sell it for that. So I said, okay, it's not for us. Well, the bank decided it's close enough, we'll take it. So they called us up and said, you can have it for that price. Well, I hadn't been able to start it because it didn't have any gas in it. Too many people had tried to start it, I guess. So I didn't really know what I was getting, but the Lord knew. And so we got it out here and put some gas in it. We got it started. But when you went up a hill, it had no power. I could hardly make it up the hill. I thought, oh no, what did I get? But we looked into it, and the catalytic converter in those days had a kind of a cage with a bunch of pellets in it, and all the pellets were gone, and the piece of metal from the bottom of the cage was resting on the exhaust. And so we removed that, and it had plenty of power, and it was a great car for quite a while. In fact, we finally sold it to my secretary after I became president here, and then I got it back, and finally I took it to the junkyard.
Well, I think our son drove it for quite a while, too.
Yeah. All right. That catches us up to our time when the Lord called us back here. Basically, I just came down for a regular constituency board meeting. You know, I'd been there every year, and it was always nice to come back and see everybody. So I arrived here, and I knew that what the leaders were hoping to do is to get Dr. Hansen to be the president of Wildwood again. He had been president for 1 year already. And so, I just thought this was a very routine thing. I was on the nominating committee again. And so he was elected to be the president. And then he was called in to see if he would be willing to do it. And he said, well, I need to talk to my wife. And so he went out. Oh, and they gave one stipulation. They said, we want you and your wife here. We don't want your wife at Poland Springs and you here. But we do want you as president. So he and his wife talked it over. And they came back and they said, no, we feel the Lord has called us to Poland Springs and we can't accept under those circumstances. Well, that threw the nominating committee into a tizzy because they had no other plans of who they were going to pick as president. And so the discussion finally settled on me. And so they asked me. Now here I made one of the biggest blunders of my life. I didn't talk to my wife. As I said, I never felt called to go back to Mountain Missionary, but I needed a job. And the whole time I was there, I didn't really feel that was where I was supposed to be. So when they asked me, I felt, the answer was yes. And my wife always went with me, so I failed to talk to her.
But you have to understand that constituency meeting went forever. It was probably one in the history of Wildwood, I don't know, but it was like 6 o'clock at night, I think, before the nominating committee came back. And so I didn't know anything about it, and I'm sitting there, and they're starting to write lists of officers, and I was like, what? And I don't know, I was just overcome with emotion, and I got up and I left. I said, let's not make a scene here. And so Ulla was there, and she was really upset. And she got up, and I wasn't there, but I was told this, that she read the riot act to the constituency and told them this was totally out of place. No board of directors had any right to ask any man to do anything unless they considered, his wife was in agreement. So I finally came back in there, and Brother Wilson said to me, well, he apologized first of all, and then he said, we want to know how you feel. Well, I had kind of been on this emotional roller coaster because this was out of the blue. And honestly, I didn't think we'd ever come back to Wildwood again. And so I still remember what I said that day. I said, there's a lot of things in life that I have done that I haven't really wanted to do. But I felt that was what the Lord was asking us to do, and I've done it. And if my husband is comfortable with this, I'm behind him.
So then, after that little wrinkle was worked out, they let me go out and talk to my wife, and we came back in. Then I forget who was first, whether Warren Wilson stood up first or Elder Frazee, and they objected to my election. And I thought, wow, that's going to flatten it for sure. The two top leaders of Wildwood don't want me to be here. But it's like the constituency just said, we're not listening at all. We want you in as president. And I'm sure that was because of the 3 years or 2 years that 3 years, that I had been here before. And I think I mentioned one of the doctors when I was not put in as vice president, one of the doctors just bawled her eyes out, and there was quite a feeling, but at that time they didn't rise up against it. They let me disappear. But when I was elected as president, the constituency just said, no, he's the one we want. And later on, Warren Wilson told me, he said, I believe that you're the one that the Lord wants to be president of Wildwood. And Elder Frazee also told me that he was behind me, that he was convinced that I was the man for Wildwood. So, it was just such a shock to them, I guess, that they just wanted to object.
Well, it was a shock to everybody. It wasn't just them, because I never dreamed of coming back here.
So that kind of brings us down to what happened here. And before I go into that, I thought it'd be nice if my son Wayne, sometimes it's very hard for children to grow up in self-supporting work. And so I asked my son Wayne if he would be willing to share what it was like growing up in self-supporting work. He couldn't be here. He would really like to be here, have been here for this event, but he made a video. So do we have that? Okay. We'll show you the video and then we'll share some more.
Hello everyone, it's good to be with you for this special weekend. I wish I was with you in person because Wildwood brings back so many good memories for me. And in fact, self-supporting work in general is something that I have grown up in and something that I have learned to love and have really enjoyed all of my life. And it's as I look back over my experience in self-supporting work that I am truly thankful for many of the things that I've learned as well as the experiences that I've enjoyed. So I wanted to share with you a few of those today for this special weekend so that you could have a little glimpse into my experience, my life, and as well to give God all the honor and glory for raising an army of lay people to be able to accomplish a work for Him. I'd like to share with you one of the things that I really appreciated about self-supporting work is that it gave me an opportunity to learn to work at a very early age. I remember that I was able to work in what we call the bagging room up in Mount Missionary Institute in New Hampshire. And my mom was in charge of the bagging room, and so my brother and I, our job was to take big 50-pound sacks and boxes and to weigh them into smaller bags. And I remember doing that for quite a while, and we learned to work at a very early age. When I was old enough to be able to sit on a riding mower, the person that was in charge of the grounds at Wildwood at that time, his name was Roy Brown, and he said, "Oh, would you like to learn to mow the grass?" And so I was like, "Yeah, sure." I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And so he gave me that opportunity to learn to mow the grass, and every day he would call me up and say, "Oh, we need you to mow here, or we need you to mow there." Seemed like it wasn't long before I was mowing half of the campus, but I really loved to do things that I felt were worthwhile. I developed an enjoyment to see things well done as well. There's nothing that looks nicer than a nice field freshly mowed, and it's something that has stayed with me to this day, something that I appreciate. I had the opportunity to work at the Lifestyle Center, washing dishes, all kinds of different things that, and in fact, it would take quite a long time if I were to tell you all of the different things that I was able to do, not only as a child, but as I grew up as well. And that's, I believe, one of the benefits of self-supporting work is that we get an opportunity to touch all different areas, not only one specialty that we might have studied and gotten a degree in and only do that all of our lives. And for me, that's something that I really appreciate very much about self-supporting work. I had a few little experiences that I think are probably long gone in self-supporting work, but nonetheless, they're wonderful memories for me. I remember that I was able to drive the car all by myself at 12 years old around campus, and I thought that was really great stuff. Of course, I'm sure that the climate has changed a little bit and those things are probably not allowed, but the good old days were wonderful for kids, and I really enjoyed that. I remember also having an opportunity to develop my gifts in different areas. Music was one of them. At a very young age, I was able to lead out choir and bell choir. And in fact, it brings me a lot of joy to know that those handbells are still being used at Wildwood. So those were things that are memories that I really treasure a lot. One thing that I really appreciate about self-supporting work is the fact that both the Bible and the spirit of prophecy are really taken seriously and taken at face value. I really am so blessed to have had a heritage where people really practiced what they preached. And I know that there's no place that's perfect, but when you really grow up in a place where people are sincere in their Christian experience, it makes a huge impact on young people or people of any age for that matter. I think that it's also very beautiful to see the way that lay ministries are active in carrying out the gospel commission, in using the right arm of the message of the gospel, the health message. Those are all things that have really made a big impact on me. I think the importance of embracing church doctrine is something that has been very present in self-supporting work. We are definitely there to support the church in every single way we can. And one of those ways is most definitely church doctrine, because we stand by it with all of our hearts, and we believe in who we are as a church. Another thing that I think is a huge benefit of supporting ministries is learning to live on sacrificial income. Sometimes we might see that as a trial, but I would say that it's definitely a huge blessing, because I see so many problems that people have in our world today where they can't live in their means. And this recurring problem is something that creates so much trouble in our world today, causing people to go into debt and to have all kinds of issues. And I think really the solution to that problem is simply learning to live on what you receive. And I think that self-supporting work has actually taught me that even beyond living within your means, it's also the importance of being able to save money. And I think my parents had a big role in that as well. They always really encouraged me from a very young age to save my money, even though it may be very small. And I'm thankful for that example. It's one that they practiced and one that they encouraged me to do. And I realized the other day when I went to shop for a new used car, I went to a few dealers, and the dealer was like, saying, "Oh, what's your budget?" And then he was like, "Oh, if you increase your budget a little bit, you can have this much more." And I said, "Well, my budget's pretty much what it is." And he said, "Well, you can always push it a little bit and easily get a loan for that." And I kind of looked at him and said, "Well, at 45 years old, I don't think I'm going to take out my first loan for a car, because I've never taken out a loan so far." And I don't say that to, try to impress anybody. I just say that because that came directly from what I learned as a way of life in self-supporting work. And I think that it's a message that the world needs to hear, and we would have a lot less trouble if we lived in that way. I think that we also can see that there's all kinds of other things that are really experienced in self-supporting work, like, for example, the realization that we're living in the end times. This is something that's been very real to me my whole life. And obviously we're closer to the end of time today than we were when I was a child. But nonetheless, that understanding that we are living in the last days was something that was very present and still is very present in our supporting ministries and in self-supporting work. I think that another thing that really stood out to me is the importance of living by faith and daring to do things for God. As parents that have not only been very involved in self-supporting work, but have also pioneered some self-supporting work, I think that that is something that really was ingrained in me very young. In fact, maybe I kind of got it through osmosis, because back in those early days, and this is probably a story that shouldn't be told too far and wide, but in any case, it's rather amusing. My parents were traveling around, and I was small enough to be able to fit in a banana box. So my parents decided that that was a good place for me to travel in, so they put me comfortably in that, and wow, it was so great to travel there. We didn't have to worry about the car seats that we worry about today. Well, I'm definitely not encouraging you not to put your baby or your child in a car seat. Car seats are much safer, but somehow it was just a glimpse into the good old days and the way things were back when you just did whatever you needed to do in order to accomplish the job. Well, we have a lot more constraint these days, and that's fine too. God is not limited to the constraints that we might have in the world that we live in today. But to me, this desire of moving out in faith and to be able to really incorporate principles of pioneering, they were things that touched me so deeply that I actually kind of followed in those same footsteps in wanting to start a ministry here in Quebec. I saw that the needs were great. I saw that there weren't many lay ministries, in fact, not really any that were functioning in the way that we see in self-supporting work in the United States and other countries. And so I really had a burden to branch out into that and to continue along the lines of doing supporting ministries. God has blessed us tremendously in being able to open doors for us. He's also allowed some very difficult trials to come our way, but the heritage that I was able to experience in the richness that both my wife and I received in self-supporting work has helped us to be able to go forward and to keep and to stay faithful. And God, yes, He provides one day at a time, and it's been a huge blessing. I think the last thing that I'd like to share that I just appreciate so much about self-supporting work is that really it's all one big family. And this family is just such a blessing to be part of it. And you really do feel like the people around you are brothers and sisters. You feel the love and the care. And that's something that I really bring with me from self-supporting work, and honestly something that I experience every day in the ministry that God has blessed us with is that family, that love, that care, and the fact that we're all in it together. God may use unusual means in order to finish His work. He may use humble servants, as we see so often in supporting ministries. And I believe that as we join together as a family, that God allows us to do it in a much more powerful way. The realization that we need each other, but most of all that we need God, and that humble dependence upon God is something that I treasure to this day. I appreciate the example that my parents have given me, both my mom and my dad, in the way that they have really exemplified that humility, that stability, that conviction, and to really, behind closed doors, I was able to see who they really are. And I can say that my parents are who they say they are, people that believe, people that live by conviction, and people that are practicing God's principles in their own private lives. And to me, if that wasn't true, I wouldn't be there today, because children see hypocrites very quickly, and they are turned off by people that don't practice what they preach. And so I think, bottom line, seeing the consistency and the transparency and the truth in what my parents have lived and the models that they have set have really just encouraged me to, by God's grace, try to give the same legacy to the next generation. And it's not easy raising kids in the world today, but I'm thankful for the example that I have in my parents, and I'm thankful for the blessing of self-supporting work.
Well, one of the things that I felt the need of, and my wife as well. We had worked for quite a few years at very, very low pay, and our clothes were not really representative for a bigger institution here. Like this one, I didn't really want to preach in the clothes that I had. And so shortly after we came, we made a trip down to Trenton, and there was a store going out of business that had men's clothes in it. And so I looked through what they had. There was just a few things left, but I found a brand new suit for $50 that fit me perfectly. And I had two suit jackets. I mean, they weren't suits, but blazers, I guess we call them. And each of them were $5 a piece. So for $60, I got a new wardrobe to be able to get started here. And I don't know that we'll have time to tell you many stories about how the Lord provided clothes through the years, but this was a regular experience from us that we've had. When we needed something, the Lord provided it at unbelievable prices. Then one day, I don't remember how long it was after we arrived here, but Elder Frazee came to me. And of course, by that time, he was not able to talk as well as well, I guess that was before he got seriously unable to talk. And so he came to me and he said, I really think that I should not be the pastor of the district anymore. Do you want me to try to find a pastor, or do you want to take the job? And so I told him I was interested in the job, and the reason is because I had had problems at other institutions with pastors who undermined the work of the institution and told people that the reforms we were teaching were not, necessary. And so I was concerned about getting a pastor like that. Anyway, I didn't know what the conference would say, but he took me down to meet with the conference president and made the suggestion that they change from him to me. The president asked me a few questions, and then I imagine took it to a committee, and the decision was made. Yes, he will be the district pastor. Well, I had the college training, but I didn't have any credentials, so they gave me a license as a pastor, and I had that for several years. But then a surprise came after maybe 5 to 8 years, somewhere in there.
Mm-mm.
No?
4 or 5 years.
Just 4 or 5 years, okay. And they said they wanted to ordain me. That was a bolt out of the blue. As I said earlier, when I came to self-supporting work and felt that God was calling me permanently to this work, I had to give up being a pastor in my mind. That was, God's call. I was supposed to give up my cherished dream of being a pastor and do this work. But God had it different. After a while, he decided he was going to have me be a pastor too. Now, of course, it would be impossible to be president and pastor without some really good elders. And praise the Lord always gave me good elders. And sometimes another pastor like Elder Boykin was here part of the time, and I think there might have been another one or two. And toward the end, Steve Cook was here. So it didn't mean a huge load beyond what I was doing. Anyway, later I found out why it was that they decided to ordain me. First of all, there was an OCI retreat over in Stone Cave. That's when OCI's headquarters were there. And they invited the president of Georgia Cumberland Conference to speak over there. And so I had all my compilations laid out on the table for the leaders around the world if they were interested. I always sold a lot of them because they were very interested in these, but since that time I've been told I can't sell them at an OCI gathering. But the president looked at this table with all of these compilations. My love is to put the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy together, either on subjects or on books of the Bible, to put the Ellen White quotes that explain the verse. And so I've got a bunch of them. They're all in the store. They're kind of in a hidden location, but you can find them if you want to see them. And he came up to me and he said, "Did you make all of these?" I said, "Yes." And I could tell it was kind of a surprise to him. He didn't say anything more. But that year, Harold Lance was elected to be on the conference committee. And unbeknownst to me, Harold Lance proposed to the conference committee that I be ordained as a pastor. And I don't know what all he said to them, but they took him up on it, and that's why they decided to ordain me as a pastor. So after that, I served as a regular ordained pastor in the conference. I was invited to pastor's meeting and always attended whenever I could, and was able to keep Wildwood in good standing with the conference. Several of them told me they were glad that Wildwood had improved from what it used to be. And I think really the truth was Wildwood had slipped a little in some of the standards, and therefore it was more acceptable. But I didn't really think of it as a compliment. But anyway, it did assist in their attitude toward us. And so as far as I know, I've been in very good thoughts from the conference people. One of the things that we had to do was to get some doctors here to make sure that the medical work could go. At first, we had Dr. McClure, and he was a one-man show. He ran hospital and lifestyle work, just one doctor, and we were pretty full. But I guess he wore himself out, and he wanted to leave. So in the providence of God, we came across Dr. Grievous, who was a physician in Atlanta. And so I went down to talk to him several times and gave him a call to consider joining us at Wildwood. And so he considered that. He had some school debts, which he thought would be a hindrance, but we were able to work out an answer for that. And so he came and became our physician. We did have Dr. Marjorie. She had been brought in earlier, her and her husband, Dr. Burnell. And so we had her, and then we had Dr. Grievous. And before too long, Dr. Sherman, who had gone to Montmorelos after being at Wildwood and obtained her physician's training, she showed an interest to come back to Wildwood. And so we were able to secure her as well, and had a good staff to run both the lifestyle and the hospital. You had a comment? No. Then another what I would consider highlight, because one of the weaknesses of my administration was to have a strong enough medical program. I have wished sometimes that Dr. Hansen and I could have worked together, because I think our talents were complementary, but it may have been that we would not have clicked to each other. I don't know. I'm sure that I'm not the easiest one for somebody else who is a full-fledged leader to like working with. But anyway, that never happened. And so, unfortunately, the work got weaker in the medical field. And I always hoped that it would get better, but it didn't. And one of the blows that happened actually before we came back was the Blue Cross Blue Shield used to pay for patients to come here. And really that was the backbone of the hospital surviving, because if Blue Cross paid, other people would pay, other insurance companies. But some of the workers, and this is one of the weaknesses of Wildwood, some workers get overzealous on reform and they apply it in ways that are destructive to the work. Well, we worked out a lingo that when somebody had hydrotherapy or they had a walk as part of their therapy, we had wording that would not alarm the insurance company. But some of the people felt that that was deceptive and they wouldn't put it on there. And so eventually it frustrated the insurance company, and they said, we're finished. We're not going to support you anymore. And as a result of that, once we lost the coverage from Blue Cross, it was self-pay for hospital, which is just not the American style. So the hospital struggled a lot after that. There's a lot more we could say, but that made it necessary to have another source of income big enough to do something. And that's where the Lord had something in mind. We didn't actually plan it. It just happened. And it happened when the institution asked my wife to take over the store. And she was told something that turned out very different.
Well, I had done pretty much everything at Wildwood over the years that I'd been here. I'd been matron, I'd done payroll, I'd done teaching classes, I had done nursing, I had done a lot of things in the times that we had been at Wildwood. But we had also, if you recall, done food business. And so when executive committee asked me if I would take over the store, which used to be where the maintenance shop is now, I told them, no, sorry, that's not something I want to do. And everybody on the executive committee, except my husband, thought it was a great idea that I should do it. So I started giving Roy all the reasons why I couldn't do it. I said, well, I do this and I do that and I do that. And I said, so I can't do the hours that you want for the store. No problem. You can have any hours you want. You set the hours, we'll do it. I said, well, there's these problems and these problems and these problems. He said, no problem, we'll take care of it. And I'll tell you, Roy Brown was a Johnny on the spot. He knew everything that went on this campus, and if he said something would be done, it was done. And the last and final thing he told me was, and you know what? We don't even care if you don't make any money, because we just feel that it's for the Lifestyle Center, for the students, the hospital, we feel like we really need a store on this campus. And the store, it was not very good. It had very few off-campus customers, and we maybe sold $10,000 a month. And so I was like, well, really, that's a pretty no-stress job. You don't have to make money. Whatever you want done, we'll fix. Okay, I guess I can do it. And so, I went into that job, and I was doing other jobs at the same time. I was doing mail, and I was doing some other things on campus. And so when I took that job, it was never within my wildest dreams to ever build a business. I was going in there to maintain a little store so they could have what they needed for for the campus use. But God just started blessing and blessing and blessing. And it kept growing and growing, and it was very unrepresentative in that maintenance shop. So after about 4 years, I told my husband, we really need to build another facility for this to accommodate this store. And he said, he took it to committee, and they did approve it, but it wasn't an easy approval. I mean, we had actually made enough profit in those 4 years to almost pay for building another store. But it was not easy. In fact, when the store was completed, I remember very distinctly, one of the old timers came in, he stood in the corner of the store, he put his hands on his hips, and he said, "Don't ask me why we ever built a store this big. We will never fill it." And I think it was within about 4 years, I don't know exactly, that we were building that second stock room. And the experience of running this store, to me, was a partnership with God. It truly was, because as I told you before, I took a 4-year RN, no business. When we went at Mountain Missionary, my husband always handled the business in the family, and when we went to Mountain Missionary, I don't think I'd ever written a check in my life. I mean, I did nothing with business. That's why I'm totally convinced that if God calls you to do something, He will give you the ability to do it. And it's really a connection with Him. I mean, I prayed a lot because I didn't really know what I was doing. I went in there and I did the best I could with what I knew. But like I told you this morning, my mother taught us some very good things. When I was young, I don't know how many times my mother told me, "Jeanette, you take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves." She told me that many, many times growing up. And I really believed it. And so it was true. God just blessed amazingly, and not just in material blessings, but in spiritual blessings too. It was when we were still in that maintenance shop that I had a couple of customers come in there, and they would come about once a month. And they were pretty strange people. But it was like sometimes you sense that there's just a longing in somebody for something better, and yet they never express it. Anyway, we developed a friendship, and I related pretty well with her. He seemed a little weird. He had hair down here, raggy pants up here, but there was something about these people that just, I don't know, I felt a connection there. And so I started praying for them. And I prayed for months. And one time my husband and I were up in New England, and we were going to Norway. And my husband's secretary called us, and she said, well, when Christmas time came around, I had given them a great controversy in a ministry of healing. And this was like into the summer, I guess. She said, "You'll never guess who was in church today." I said, "I don't have a clue. Tell me." And she said, "That couple that you've been praying for all these months," she said, "they came to church today." I said, "Wow, I can't believe it." And I wasn't there. And so one of the families on campus had invited them home. And they had asked all kinds of Bible questions. And so the next week we flew back. And my husband and I parted in Boston, I believe. And I flew home, and he flew to Colorado. And when I got home, it was a Friday. And it was our neighbors. And she called, and she said, "Jeanette, this couple came to church last week." And she said, "We invited them for lunch, and they had so many questions. If they come this week, do you think you can invite them?" Now, this is Friday. I said, and I've been gone for 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, "Yeah, sure." But they didn't come that Sabbath. And so then I took a postcard, and I wrote to them because I had their address. And I said, "I'm really, really sorry that I missed you. And come back next week, and you can plan to eat with us on Sabbath," and so on and so forth. And so the next Sabbath they came. And the next Sabbath, and the next Sabbath, and for 4 months probably. They came every Sabbath, and every Sabbath they came to our house to eat, and every Sabbath we studied the Bible, and they just were so thirsty they would just drink it up. And then we took them on a trip with us to Wisconsin when we had to go there, and in a very short time, maybe 6 months, that couple was ready for baptism, and that couple was Lou and Darlene Keith. And so, and from there, it spread. Spreading the gospel is like a ripple effect because it had such an effect on her sister, her brother-in-law, her friends. We studied with all of them. They all became baptized members. And it wasn't just them. For me, I hate to be up front. I really do. But when I was in that store, that cash register was like my pulpit. And I really felt in a real way that it was working for God, that He helped me to make decisions that were difficult to make. And from a financial perspective, we went from selling about $10,000 a month to selling over $1 million a year. And it was. I don't take any credit. It was God's doing. Oh, yes, I had to do some work. There's no doubt about that. But God is so good and so willing to work with us. We're just willing to work with Him.
As I mentioned, the people that I got to study with and became Seventh-day Adventists has been one of my greatest joys, and we want to praise God for every one of them. I'll just list down some of them, and this is not, our memory is not as good as it should be. But as a result of Lou and Darlene, they had friends called Stan and Linda Lawton, and we studied with them, and they became Seventh-day Adventists. They became the pillar of the Mentone group. In fact, they're the ones that sort of insisted that we start a Mentone group because it's an hour different from here. I thought that they would come to the Wildwood Church, but after doing that for a little while, they said, no, we don't want to do that every Sabbath, so please start a group down here in Mentone. Also, the sister of Darlene, Dow, and I can't remember exactly how Dow came in, whether I studied with her or whether her sister did, but I studied with her husband, John, and they joined the church. Another one that you know is William O'Grady. That was a very interesting one. There was a man who came to my attention who lived in Chattanooga. He worked in the stone quarry. And I studied with him and his son, and his wife would almost never listen. She didn't want to study. But here she shows up with William.
Actually, what happened with Sonia, she was a customer at the store, and she came quite often. And we were pretty good friends. And when she was leaving the area to move to Virginia, she especially came by to say goodbye to me. And so she left, and she was gone for 7 years, I guess, and I didn't hear anything from her. And she moved back to the Atlanta area, and she called me one day, and she said, Jeanette, do you know who this is? And it had to have been God that helped me to recognize her. But I said, Sonia, where are you? What have you been doing? And she told me about this guy she was going with, William, and she said, he's a really Wildwood type person. And she said, I want to bring him out there to meet you guys.
So I recognized right away he was an honest-hearted man, and so we had studies. They came in. You're probably familiar with Mary Graham, Gene Dedner. Actually, that was started by
Ravencroft?
Yeah, Jesse Ravencroft, but then he left the area, and so I took over the studies.
Or maybe Joseph, I don't know.
And he came in. Also, we've had some sad experiences. When you try to win souls, not everybody sticks with it. And some of the brightest converts sometimes don't stick with it. And so the first bad experience I had with that was with Joe and Kathy Perez. This is going back now, past...
Back to Beautiful Valley days, actually.
Yeah, and also when we were students at Wildwood. I got really burdened that here I was, trained to be a pastor, never had brought anybody into the church, and so I was really burdened with that. Tried some Bible studies here at Wildwood, but none of them panned out to do anything. And then we got the call to Beautiful Valley, and after getting there, one Sabbath, Joe came to church. And so the Lord,
A lot like Lou.
yeah, he had a long ponytail down the back and all that. We could tell you a lot of stories. But anyway, I studied with him. He was baptized. We left before his wife got baptized. But those that were left behind when we moved to Lithia studied with her, and she came in. And unfortunately, he gave it up, and from what his wife says, is very angry at me about something, but she wouldn't tell me what it was. And she said, you better not talk to him. So we pray for him, but it's kind of a sad part of our life. And two others that you know here, Dylan Sherrill seemed like such a bright convert, and I thought I was thinking of great things for him. And Ezra, I forget his last name right now. Ezra what? Dixon, yeah. Ezra Dixon. And so those have been kind of a heartache to us, but at least we know that they had the opportunity to learn, and we trust that at some time the Lord will lead them back. Let me just say a few things. There was quite a bit of growth during this time. For instance, the education building that we have now was just underway. I had been, when I was vice president, opposed to that style, but when I was gone, they went ahead with it, and it was to the point where, you might as well finish it. So the Lord brought in donations enough to finish that building. Even quite a bit of the finishing was done by outside contractors. We usually like to do our own building, but in order to get it done, we did hire somebody, and the Lord provided. I remember there was one lady who was a hospital patient, and she really felt blessed here, and she later went home and passed away, but she was so impressed with Wildwood that she left us in her will, and we got, I know it was over 100,000. I don't remember how much it was, and she gave us some property in Chicago, which turned out to be a headache rather than a help. But that was one way God provided. There was another lady who really wanted to be here because her son had some health difficulties, and so we took them in and took care of him, and later she developed cancer, and so she gave a lot of money to help get the spa building, and the house we live in now was paid for by them, and so there was quite a bit. There was a Dr. Cherney that was here, and he had a rich brother, and he talked his rich brother into getting a future plan of what we wanted to spend, and what buildings we wanted to build, and so on. And so we figured out about $1.5 million, I think, and presented that to him. We didn't get that much, but he gave very liberally. And another lifestyle guest that came here was very impressed with Wildwood and gave $100,000. And so, as I said, I'm not a fundraiser. I was thankful when Fernando came along. He's a fundraiser, and the Lord has blessed him, but I wasn't. So up till the time he came, that was the way the Lord provided for the advanced moves that we wanted to make. We'll get you out of here by 7:30, even if we have to abbreviate. I guess I had I don't know what they call it, but when you hit 40, some men go through
Midlife crisis.
Yeah, midlife crisis. Well, I didn't go through it at 40, but later on, I was kind of struggling with just the same routine. And all of a sudden, an invitation came from Voice of Prophecy. And they wanted to send 50 pastors to the Philippines in order to do 50 evangelistic series, all simultaneously. And our son Daryl was interested in the Philippines a lot, so I thought, well, let's try. So one Friday night, I presented the amount of money that it would take to send a group of people over there to the Philippines. And if I remember right, between the ones that pledged that Friday night and the ones that later said they wanted to help, we got over $12,000, and it was just Wildwood people. It wasn't, outsiders or anything in here. And so the money came in that fast, and I knew that the Lord must be leading to go over and do that evangelistic series. Well, based on our background of self-supporting work, when I got there, I saw the waste of money that Voice of Prophecy was doing. Now, I'm sure they're doing the best they could do, but I saw, wow, I could come over here for less than half of the money. So for 7 more years, we went over, and the Lord impressed.
Not me, not we. I went twice. It was a lot of, it was very hard for me to get out of here. And both times I went, well, one time when I went with him, I ended up in the hospital when I got back. And so our son Wayne, and after Wayne got married, his wife Isabel, they went with him several times.
My dad even went with me once. And so the Lord helped me to connect with a young pastor that needed some help to finish his college, and he was dynamic. I'm not, but he was. And so he would translate for me, and wow, we'd get results. Sometimes we got 400 people that would decide to be baptized, or at least 100 and something.
And I have never in my life seen anybody could translate like this guy. I mean, he could translate to every mannerism, every movement of the hand. He was very quick with his translation. Whatever Wilbur did, this guy did and said exactly the same thing. It was amazing.
She's talking about the one that helped her in the Voice of Prophecy, right?
Was it? Maybe so.
Yeah, because
It's very good.
actually, trying to think of his name right now, Caesar Dizon.
Oh, Caesar was very good too.
He ended up coming to Wildwood and got sold on medical missionary work, so he's back there promoting medical missionary work. The last thing I want to share, and again, I'll have to be very brief about it, is that I really have a worldview. I want to see the work done everywhere, not just here at Wildwood. And so one of the burdens that was on my heart, even though OCI had been formed before this time, I had a burden to see Wildwood establish institutions in other parts of the world. And so the Lord sent us key people. And I couldn't have done it without Pastor Cleveland, because he was a big help in helping it to actually happen. But the Lord sent the leaders, or the future leaders, of the Ukraine project called Our Home, Dr. Anna and Svetlana and several. They came over here and received training and went back and started what I consider one of the most successful programs, because they have reproduced themselves so many times in other locations. Until the tension between Russia and Ukraine came along, they were just amazing in what they could do. And that was a real blessing. Another one that the Lord brought here, we can't take credit for any of these, but the Lord just brought them here so that they could receive the training. It was Dr. Nick Dan from Romania, and also Dr. Morshan. The two of them came over here with their wives and received training at Wildwood and went back to establish an incredibly successful institution in Romania that also has reproduced itself in many places, both in Romania, and they were key in getting the one in Israel as well. And Dr. Nick Dan is a credible guy. He became even a lecturer in one of the medical schools on nutrition. And so he's a well-known figure over there. Another one that the Lord brought here was the Hembreys, and they felt a call to go to Brazil and start a project. They had worked in some other countries, but they wanted to start something there. And so they went down, and their story is an amazing story. And talk about difficulties that they've had to face and even losing their marriage and all the rest. But Nellie has continued to keep that open. Then there was the Philippines. Lou and Darlene took an interest in the Philippines to get a project started over there. And Elaine Batista came to Wildwood for training and also became not only interested in the Philippines, he started 3 or 4 in the Philippines, but then he branched out. He became a field vice president of OCI and branched out to that whole area. And so, that's been a great joy to us to have a small part in their training. All these people look to their time at Wildwood as their, training to do what they're doing now. Also, Portugal, Dr. Viriato Ferreira. Maybe he came here because of his uncle, I don't know. But anyway, he came here, and he looks to Wildwood. In fact, he's going to watch this program, he said. He wants to listen to it. He was led by God to start a project in Portugal, which has grown since those beginning days. One of the interesting ones was Jiva Jyothi, and his name was John Sundaraj. And somehow, the way he went about things offended a lot of my staff, and so they didn't have any confidence in him to do much of anything. And so he didn't really stay here that long, but he still feels that Wildwood and the encouragement that I gave him was what it took to get going over there in Jiva Jyothi. And
That's in India.
that's in India, yeah. And, there's been some difficulties, I think, over there, but he's doing something anyway. Then another young man that God brought here was Hector Rodriguez, and he was from the Dominican. So he went over to the Dominican, established a project. I sort of surmised that the load that he put on his wife was part of why the marriage broke up. And so he came back to the United States, and he, did a work over here, and then he found another wife. And when he got another wife, he went back to the Dominican. And so he's got, it's more of a personal project, but he's probably the only personal project that has ever gotten a $100,000 donation to start a project. And that's how he got the property and so on over there in Dominican. Another one that didn't really take place for a long time was Kazakhstan, but Svetlana, actually, Wayne, our son, went to Ukraine on a mission trip, and he met Svetlana, and he kind of was interested in her. So he talked her into coming to Wildwood for training, along with a couple other young people from Ukraine. But he met his present wife, and now he was kind of torn which way he was going to go, and he ended up marrying Isabel, which I think was the Lord's will, because the Lord has used Svetlana to start a wonderful project in Kazakhstan for an area that's very hard to work, but the health message still works there. I should mention Elaine Batista again too, because he and Daniel Jami and their wives came to Wildwood about the same time and took classes. And God has used Daniel, besides working at Wildwood, to establish a work, where is it? Indonesia. And so I'm probably leaving out some, but those are the ones that came to mind that has really caused us to praise God that while we were working away here, that at the same time, those who came for training were inspired to go out and do something for the Lord in their own country or in some other country. So as we end, we have to give all the praise and all the honor to God. As I said, I believe, because of being a president so long, for a while I started thinking I wasn't an ordinary person. But when I stopped being president of something, people helped me to realize I was just an ordinary person. And I praise the Lord for that training, because, when you have a responsibility that everybody looks up to and talks wonderful to you and all that, there is an impact that it makes eventually, especially when you have it for so long. And so I praise the Lord for the years that I haven't been the president of, I am the president of a couple things, but I don't do any work with it. So I believe the Lord is really blessed, and as I look back the past 50 years, if you were to ask me, with all that you have seen, would you do it again? The answer is absolutely. I believe that we made the right decision to join Wildwood and to join what looked like a very sacrificial work, but to be honest, as we look back, it doesn't seem like it was sacrificial at all. Yes, there were times we didn't have everything we'd like to have, but actually the joy of the service and what we saw God doing was so rewarding that we didn't really worry about that. We were just happy for the work that God was doing.
Yeah, I do have a couple of things I would like to say in closing also. One of them is, no matter how little you have, don't ever be afraid to share. I mean, I'm talking about monetarily, goods, whatever it is. God's shovel is so much bigger than ours. And God has taught me so many lessons in this. Don't ever be afraid to share what you have with others, because there's always somebody worse off than you, even if you think you're bad off. And another thing that really bothered me when we first came to self-supporting work, because we kind of understood what the situation was. And we, between us, decided we would never tell people what our needs were, and we would never complain that we didn't have enough. And God has really honored that. And because it really bothered me. It bothered me a lot when I would hear people from self-supporting work complaining that they didn't have this or they didn't have that, or I get paid so little, or I'm so poor. What are you saying? You're saying God's not taking care of you? I mean, it was a slap in the face to God when we talk that way and when we act that way, because God is so good to us and he takes care of everything we need. I'd also like to say something to the wives here, because I honestly believe that self-supporting work is a lot harder on the women than the men. Men have their goals and objectives and their plans laid out. And when you marry somebody, you're committed for life. So whatever your husband decides to do, that's what you're going to be doing. And so, but there's been a statement in Ministry of Healing that many of you know, I'm sure, but it has been an anchor for me through these years. And it's the one that talks about the Father's love encircling the Son. And then it's page 488 and 489 in Ministry of Healing. And it says it's for us too, that if our life is in God's hands, nothing can come to us unless his permission gives it, unless he gives permission. So, when we're going through trials and struggles that we don't like, or we don't think should be that way, or somebody hasn't been fair, or this wasn't right, or that wasn't right, we have to remember that it doesn't come to us unless God lets it come to us. And if he lets it come to us, he lets it come to us for a reason, that we've got lessons to learn. And that was actually really hard, something hard for me to learn. I remember, I think the first time the reality actually dawned on me, I'm kind of slow sometimes. I think we were in Beautiful Valley. And I don't remember the experience, but I was going through something that was very frustrating, and it seemed like I had been through it before, and I was venting. And I said, I am so sick and tired of going through this. And my husband looked at me and he said, you know what? Maybe if you learn the lessons that God has for you to learn out of this experience, you wouldn't have to go through it anymore. And I said, what? It was kind of like a new revelation to me, but I really believe that. And the last thing is that, we're told, unless we forget the way the Lord has led us in our past, we have nothing to fear for the future. The future sometimes looks daunting, and humanity may be even scary, but we don't have anything to fear as long as we trust God. And we remember how he's been with us, how he's led us, how he's guided us, how he's directed, and he will be faithful until the end.